All right, everybody, Gun Owners Radio, welcome. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. We make activism easy. So welcome. Thank you for joining us on a Sunday in between Christmas and New Year's. Check out gunownersradio.com. Sign up for our email, share our social media, and tell your friends. Tell them to go to gunownersradio.com. Tell them to watch and listen to us and spread the word. We're going to do something a little bit different, but before that, Alicia, tell them about our new home.
So Gun Owners Radio has a new home here at Discount Gun Mart, and as a way to save things, we just like to ask you to check out Discount Gun Mart, and they have a location both on Marina Boulevard as well as Santee by Gillespie Field off the 67. Just go to discountgunmart.com for more info.
There we go. So today, rather than do the segments that we usually do, we're going to do a couple of really cool interviews, and we have a very cool special guest in the studio today, Bishop Cornelius Bowser. Pastor Bowser, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
You bet. Now, you and I have gotten to know each other a little bit over the last couple of years.
Yes.
And we've worked on a couple different projects. We actually did another podcast together.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm really excited about this conversation. I think that it's going to be, the catalyst was a post that you put on your Facebook page and a study that we're going to talk a lot about.
Yes.
And I think that it's the perfect conversation and the perfect two people to have this conversation, because I think that we know each other well enough that we respect each other, that we trust each other, that we're coming from a sincere place.
Right.
And but we still know that we come from a different enough background and a different enough perspective that it won't be an argument, and it won't be well, I agree with you and you agree with me. You know what I mean?
Right,
it'll actually be a productive conversation.
Exactly. Thank you.
I don't know. What do you think?
No, absolutely. I really appreciate it. You know, being dealing with the gun violence prevention and being that activist out there, really trying to reduce gun violence in, especially the Black and brown community. My expertise is dealing with the Black community, especially as it relates to gangs and so on. Doing that work, it's really about trying to make sure that the individuals who are engaged and involved in the gun violence, that number one, they get the support they need, but also make our community safe and get them, to get these illegal guns out of their hands. And so many times when you talk about guns and you talk about access and things like that, it can stir things up. People, if they don't understand your motive, where you're coming from, they can really begin to feel as though you're trying to take people's guns, which for me, that's not my goal.
And I think in these conversations, it's important to really drill down and define and explain and be extremely specific. Like,
yes,
hey, what are you talking about? Like, for example, I liked the fact that you said illegal guns.
Right.
You're not talking about legal guns or legally owned guns.
Right.
You're talking about the illegal guns that people use for bad things.
Exactly.
So tell people, before we get too deep into it, tell people what you do. You're a bishop.
Yes.
And so tell people exactly, what you do for a living and what you do for the community. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm pastor of Charity Apostolic Church. I've been pastoring since 95. So we're going on, I think it's about 29 years of pastoring. And so along with that, our church, we have a ministry called Shaphat Outreach, which this Shaphat Outreach is centered around violence intervention and prevention. And so we focus on guns as relates to gangs, looking at the data in our community. And when you talk about homicides, gun homicides, or gang homicides, I should say, 100% of those homicides, the weapon of choice was a gun. And so with looking at that, what I decided to do is, okay, we want to reduce gun violence in our community. We got to find that small percentage of population that are involved in the gangs, that are the ones that's committing the violence, and try to reach out to them, to offer them resources, bring them into our program to change their behaviors, but also to get them to put these, as you would say, those illegal guns down, because, we're talking about all types of guns. Most times handguns, not rifles or assault weapons and things like that. We're dealing with the handguns. But with these handguns, many times they're ghost guns. Many times they're guns that they might have stolen out of a residence or out of a car and so on. So my angle, my push has always been, I don't. If there's a limited access of illegal guns for these individuals, then that's part of what we can do to reduce the gun violence, but most definitely have to change these individuals' mindset if we're really going to get them to stop doing these illegal things as far as shooting and killing people and things like that, because we want to see the reduction in gun violence when it comes to gang homicides and so on.
See, and there's one thing that's really unique about what you do and where you're coming from, as far as your perspective, is you're basically saying, hey, look, I'm out here working in my community.
Yes.
And there are people that are doing bad things.
Yes.
And the bad things that they're doing are horrific. They're killing people. They're maiming people and permanently injuring people. And they're using a gun.
Right.
And they're not just using any gun, they're using a pistol. And where are they getting this pistol? Well, they're not going down and buying it from the gun shop.
Right.
You know what I mean? Right. They're not taking an NRA course and learning how, you know what I mean? They're stealing it. Well, where are they stealing it from? Well, they're breaking into a home, they're breaking into a car, and they're stealing it. And the reason I want to, and those are those steps where you're going, hey, look, my motivation is not guns, you know, Pastor, right? Your motivation is, I want to try to stop bad things from happening.
Exactly.
So when I see bad things happening, well, I focus on a number of different things, like and the reason I'm walking through this is the people who are listening are people who have fought back against storage laws.
Right.
You know what I mean? Where you're going, hey guys, I'm trying to stop people from getting hurt, and they're stealing guns that are not secured or whatever. And we're going, hey, wait a minute, if they don't break into our house, they won't steal our guns. And if I got to lock it, why do I have to be less safe so that the other community, you know what I mean?
That's the argument I hear. Yeah, absolutely.
And I think it's an important, now that being said, it was one thing that was really interesting when we were on that last podcast. Is we were talking about how you do a lot of work with some of the gun control groups.
Oh yes.
And we were chatting about that, and there was something you said in that conversation that stuck with me. You said, "Look, they're there. They're showing up."
Yes.
So you're doing work. You're trying to make your community a better place, not necessarily just about guns.
Right.
Not even necessarily just about violence. You're working with young men and women and whatever. You're just trying to make your community a better place.
Exactly.
And then here you have, a dozen, gun control advocates who are saying, hey, I want to help.
Right.
And you're like, well, great. Let's do this. You know what I mean? Like, and I think that I thought that was a really interesting. Anyway, So let's get to the article. I wanted to kind of give everybody a little bit of context, and then, the other thing is this has been important to me as a Second Amendment advocate since I began, as far as like how different communities view guns and the motivation behind, folks that are working towards more stringent gun laws. Like, what's the motivation here? Because it's different in San Diego than it is in Alabama.
That's right.
Or Mississippi. It's different in San Diego even than it probably is in L.A. or New York or Detroit. It's very, very different. So I've been trying to, but I want. I definitely want to put out there that I've put my money where my mouth is.
Absolutely.
And with as far as this goes, I mean, we've had our BIPOC shooting socials and educational, lectures. For those who aren't familiar, BIPOC stands for Black, Indigenous, People of Color. And we've put together a class for people that have, how would you describe it? The class that you and Alicia do.
We call it gun safety class.
It's a gun safety class.
That's what I call it, yes.
But what was the motivation for that? It's for people who...
Yes, that has to deal with individuals that have been arrested for possession of a gun, and they didn't have that right or that legal right to have that gun. And so they weren't charged with a misdemeanor because a felony because they weren't a felon, right? If there was a felony, they'd have been charged with a felony. They were charged with a misdemeanor. And a new law passed a couple years ago in regards to individuals that are arrested with a gun, and if they go through certain type of diversion, the charges could be dropped. And so that was our carrot to offer these young men. It's like, hey, you come to our program 12 to 18 months, you go through our program, you complete the program, go back to court, then they'll drop the charges. And so one of the other things that was a motivation to these young people is that we were also letting them know that, like, look, if you get this off your record, right, you don't have a felony now. If you get this off your record, then you can go legally purchase a gun. We'll pay for you to go through a gun safety class so that you can take care of all the legal requirements in order to get a gun, right? Yeah. And then while they're going through our class, we deal with CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy. We use motivational interviewing. We also use the 5 stages of change to change their behaviors. So by the time they complete the class, they have self-control. They have these life skills to be able to handle anger, their anger management, and think responsibly. And so we take them through that so where they know they have changed their behavior and they really know how to manage their emotions. And at the same time, the charges are dropped. Then we get them through the gun safety classes. Then if they want to purchase a gun, they can get one legally. And we know that they have the life skills to really handle that gun safely. And I've been through the class myself, even though I don't possess a gun. I went through the class. I thought it was great. I really, on the other side, went bragging about how great the class was. Good. And how educational it was and empowering it was, and I learned a lot in the class. So I know that gun safety class is a great tool to use to help these young men to, once they go through the process, to be able to purchase a gun and be able to have it legally, and yet at the same time be a law-abiding citizen.
Yeah, and you called up and said, hey, this is what we're trying to accomplish. And I got with Alicia, and Alicia did a fantastic job of putting together some curriculum and delivering the class. Alicia, have the classes been?
They've been fantastic. So I will tell you, I can really see, because what happens is the way that this works is like Cornelius will come in. Sometimes he sends one of his guys that works with him, and they sit and they stay, and they kind of are there to kind of help supervise and to kind of just be there to be a presence for the people that are there here, to go through the course, and you can really tell and see that they respect. And you can see that. And I see some of them struggle a little bit. Like I see little comments come out here and there, but you can really see the respect. And they really take it serious, and they really are there, and they are eager to learn. And what I've done is with this, when they come into me for this class, for that portion of the purpose of the class as they go through this program, is first of all, I give them an outlet really quick. We start with introductions, and they're always eager to tell their story. And I feel like it's important for those who are willing to share, and I always give them an out for those who want to keep their information private. What's your story? Because I want to make sure that I address everything. Because I have kind of a standard with this class. I cover a lot. I talk about the parameters that how do you need to be able to legally purchase? Not only purchase, but then once you legally own a firearm, what's the law on transport? Right, what's the law on home storage? And so I kind of go through all of the law. We spend a lot of time talking about law. And then towards the end of the class, we use blue guns, we use dummy guns, we talk about safety, we talk about, all this stuff about safe and proper handling as well. But then, I let them kind of tell a little bit about their story, about what kind of got them to where they are. Yeah. And then I make sure that if there's something that I've not already covered in the law that applies to them and their situation, we talk about it. Because a lot of the times I will tell you, they really don't agree with their charge. They don't agree that they did anything wrong sometimes. And so it's an opportunity to have a discussion. And so we talk about it, and then you can just kind of see like lights come on sometimes, and so it's good.
And that's a perfect segue into this article. But I wanted to, frankly, for selfish reasons, I wanted to spend the last 2 minutes saying, hey, I've talked about systemic racism. I've reached out to the community. Because there are going to be people who, and through these efforts, I've gotten criticized by white people. I've gotten criticized by black people. I've had people threaten me, and so what I want to do is I wanted to spend a couple of minutes before we get deep into this conversation saying, hey, look, I've put my money where my mouth is. I've reached out to this, all the communities, but I've reached out to this community in a sincere and real way. This is not, I'm not just sitting back throwing stones or whatever. As we have this conversation, I want people to know that, hey, I've made a real sincere effort. That this is something that is meaningful to me. Right. I'm not just leveraging this conversation or to advance Second Amendment rights. I feel like there are way too many advocacy groups that don't really care as much about their subject as they do trying to get somebody from their party elected. Right. You know what I mean? And they go, hey, well, I'm going to use this community to further my. And that's not what I'm trying to do.
Right.
But anyway. So
And let me just say also, because when we was at the lab podcast, as you said, you reached out, and I really appreciate it because one of the things you were saying, hey, I want to work with you. Anything I could do, we can do work together. Let's do it.
Yeah.
And I was really surprised because of everything I heard about Mike Schwartz. But I said, oh, okay. And
everything you heard about Mike Schwartz.
yeah. With on the other side, it's nothing nice, bro. But once I got to know you and you reaching out, I was like, okay, I think we can work together. And as I was sharing with you before, and I hope we can bring more people in to this space working with us as far as what we're trying to do in our community. Because as I said before, working with, they don't call them gun control groups, but gun violence prevention groups.
Yeah.
On the other side, many times, trying to get laws to restrict, access to guns and possession of guns and things like that. They're, like you said, like you mentioned, they're the only ones that really come to the community and really want to work with us and help us and things like that. But our primary focus has always been what's going on in our community and how to get all these illegal guns out of our community so that we can save lives.
Right. Okay. So perfect. They are standing there in the trenches, shoulder to shoulder. I totally get it.
Yeah.
And that really, when you and I had that conversation, that shined a bright light because I'm sitting here going, I don't get it. Like they're advocating for laws that are putting folks in your community in jail longer, in jail, period. You know what I mean?
Right.
I'm going, I don't get it. And I think it's important to understand, even if people are never going to agree with you and never going to, advocate, whatever. It's important to understand, like, where are they coming from? Like, what exactly is motivating them? So, okay, So here's the post. Let's talk about the actual study here. Here's what you wrote. Is it okay if I read?
Yeah.
Okay. Reflecting on the reality many black males face today, this article I recently read highlights the deep-seated reasons why some feel the need to carry guns for safety. It also brought me back to my own experience. Like many, I was introduced to firearms at a young age. At just 9 years old, I even held a hand grenade. The journey into understanding guns is complex. Often rooted in family tradition and societal realities, it's important for us to discuss these experiences and their impact on our communities. Read this article. Now, the article is it's a study. Young black males feel they need to carry guns for safety. And then there's actually there were a bunch of articles written. This is off of I want to get this right. It's Black Enterprise Wealth for Life, and it's a website. A new study recently published in the Delaware Journal of Public Health provides a candid look into the perspective of young black males in Houston, Baltimore, Jackson, Mississippi, and Wilmington. I think that's Jackson, Mississippi. I think it's Houston, Texas, Baltimore, Jackson, Mississippi, and Wilmington, Delaware. Yeah, okay. Locations often associated with violence. And that's an important thing, too, that we talk about exactly where this study was done.
Right.
Because I think there's a difference between black communities and the black community.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, correct me if I'm wrong, but the black community encompasses every black American in the United States. It's very, very broad.
Exactly.
And there's
not monolithic. Yes.
Yeah. There's diversity, different experiences, different traditions, that sort of thing. A black community would be like a neighborhood that's predominantly black in a city somewhere.
Right.
And so I want to make sure that when we talk about these specific black communities, we're not necessarily talking about the black community.
Exactly.
You might have a totally different experience if you're black in San Diego.
Right. So, exactly.
According to WHYY, which is a news outlet, researchers at Texas Southern University, Delaware State University, Coppin State University, I hope I didn't get that wrong, Jackson State University, and Thurgood Marshall University conducted the study among black males between 15 and 24 who either recently owned or currently own firearms. And it was interesting, if anybody, men, women, black, white, doesn't matter. But 15 to 24, it's really hard to own a firearm legally from 15 to 17. You know, there's a couple years there where it's like, how do they even get that? You know, but we'll talk more about exactly what they mean by gun ownership and as we get into the study more. Their study, which is titled Understanding the Perception of Place and Its Impact on Community Violence, depicts that many of the black males who participated felt they needed a firearm for protection after they witnessed or experienced gun violence in their neighborhoods. These events often led the participants to describe their cities in a negative light, most often using the terms, and man, these terms were crazy to me, Pastor.
Yes.
But direct quotes, this is how they described the cities they lived in. This isn't me or the researcher, you know.
It's them.
It's them.
People, yeah.
Yeah, it's the 15 to 24-year-old black males. This is how they describe their community. Murder town, treacherous, crazy, chaotic, and a war zone.
Yes.
The respondents also described an early introduction to gun violence, some as young as 10, and many of them had guns introduced to them by family members. Their decision to carry a gun though shaped by social media pressures, limited economic opportunity, limited role models, and easy access to firearms in their communities were not made lightly nor in a vacuum. So let's just start there. Let's talk about that. If no matter how old I am, you know, 15 to 24 or 48.
Right.
If I'm living somewhere for whatever reason, if I have to live somewhere, you know, I have no choice, but here's where I'm living. And I'm looking around and I describe it as a murder town or treacherous or crazy or chaotic or a war zone.
Yeah.
Then I'm going to make the decision to own a gun too.
Right.
You know, it's interesting to me that when you cut through kind of the rhetoric and the political slogans, you know, and the statistics that people can use to, you know, prove any point they want, when you cut through all that, people understand, and maybe you disagree with me, but let me know. People understand that, hey, if you need to defend your life, the most effective tool to defending your life is a firearm. And it's not a sword or a knife.
Right.
You know, it's not harsh words.
Right.
You know, it's not wrestling or jiu-jitsu.
Right.
If you're like, hey, I live in Murder Town and it's a war zone, you know, and it's crazy and chaotic and treacherous, then the best way for me to defend myself is to own a gun. So I guess what I'm saying is, do you agree with that? And I don't know, do you blame them for wanting to own a gun?
Right. I would say yes. I agree. And, you know, from a personal perspective, on my personal self, I wouldn't do that, right? And I could share later why I wouldn't do it. But I understand why folks in the black community, especially in these pockets where there's a lot of violence that's happening, where they would get a gun to feel safe, right? I have friends that legally have guns. My son-in-law, he possesses a gun. He can conceal and all of that, right? Yeah. And he goes places with me a lot of times. I don't know if he's packing or not, you know, but at the same time, so I know that, you know, in our community, people have these guns, right? But they have them legally. Yeah. And I don't have no problem with that if, you know, I think they're responsible citizens. And that's the thing I think a lot of times people don't really understand when it comes to the black community is that some of the most dangerous places is hardly dangerous at all. And what I mean by that is that it's a small group of people that are actually committing the violence. It's not the whole. I'm glad you made the distinction. It's not even when you're talking about a community. It's not that whole community. It's these few individuals that are making it seem like the whole community is unsafe. But I clearly understand why a black resident would want to get a gun, go get one. I mean, you know, as long as you get it legally and things like that. So that's not the problem, but the problem for me would be these young men that would get access to that, whether they a family member, because you do have people, and I'm a former gang member myself, and I possessed a lot of guns and used them and so on. And so I do know that how guns get in our community, and many times they do get in our community because those that can legally purchase them, they will go buy those guns, scratch off the serial number. At least, that's what they used to do, and then sell them right into the streets and so on. And many times they break into homes. I broke into home and stole guns when I was young and so on. And then sometimes you would take them from someone, what have you, snatch the gun from somebody. So I've seen all those different type of things happen. So my thing with the residents is make sure you secure that gun when it's not in your control so that it doesn't get stolen and end up in the streets or in our community where a young person that doesn't have those life skills will use that on someone else. And the other part that I would say in regards to the young people that are carrying guns that feel that they have to do this because they feel unsafe. And I clearly understand that and the trauma that they're dealing with and everything. And one of the things that we deal with in our community now, we recognize and understand that, like, even illegally, right? These young men are not going to, from 15 to 24, and like you said, even 48, 49, 50, even older, those that cannot, because they have a felony, as you were speaking in your op-ed about, that have a felony and cannot possess a gun or what have you, they're still going to get one because of what you just mentioned about those communities. So we understand that these young people, 15 to 24, they're not giving up their guns, even if they're legal. So what we try to do is we try to get in there and teach them, right, and train them and show them how to manage their thinking so they can have more self-control so that they don't just be going out there like a wild cowboy and just shooting, killing people and things like that. Yes, the ultimate objective is get people to do things legally and get them to get those guns out of their possession if they're illegal, because you can get arrested and you can go to jail and you can mess up your life that way. Yeah. And so we try to explain those things. But the main thing with that is what we're trying to do now is even if you don't want to give up your gun, we still want to help you to change your behavior and give you some life skills so that you can manage and control what you're doing when you have possession of that gun.
See, and that is in the next part, and that leads into the next part I wanted to talk about. Their decision to carry a gun, though shaped by social media pressures, limited economic opportunity, limited role models, and easy access to firearms in their communities, were not made lightly nor in a vacuum. And they talked about it in the study, how the conclusions they came to, one of the, there were a lot of things, basically exactly what they said, but they went real specific and talked about how the music they're listening to and the shows they're watching and the role models that they have is where they're getting this idea that violence is a viable option. But okay, so, and like you said, it's a very limited, so we're talking about a small group of people in a very few areas. So what's the danger? You know what I mean? Right. So who is looking to harm these folks? If you're a 15 to 24-year-old in this community and you're looking at your community and you're going, hey, this is chaotic, this is a war zone, this is, who are the people that are making it that?
Right. And I would say several people, right? But the main, what we deal with and what we've seen is that is most time when there's gun violence in our community, it's either domestic or what you would call domestic violence, right? You can have a young person get into it with his girlfriend go get their brother, and this person could be one of those who are maybe involved in gangs, could be someone who have this violent, connected with our subculture, with the gangs and so on, have a violent mentality, and the way they know how to handle their problems is with a gun. And so you have that. You have, of course, these gang rivalries, and that's kind of where we find ourselves in the midst of fighting against and trying to prevent from happening is the gang violence as it relates to guns, any type of violence. But we know that guns, like you said, it's the most effective weapon if you want to protect yourself and defend yourself and really take down someone. And then you also have individuals, when you talk about community gun violence, you have individuals that just they don't know each other, but they get in an argument or whatever it may be, and then they both pull out guns and start shooting at each other. Many times when these incidents happen, and if you look at the reports that the police, when they give the reports and their press releases, these guys had illegal guns. And so that's kind of been the focus. But for the mass majority, when you talk about homicides and so on, you're really looking at, especially in the black community, you're looking at gangs. The last report I looked at, and I may be off a little bit. Hold on, I don't know why. I thought I turned my phone off while we talk about this.
That's all right.
But When I've looked at one of the Sandak reports, and one of the things it talked about was homicides, right? Mm-hmm. And when you're looking at the black community, and when you talk about homicides, they say, okay, what was the motive behind this homicide? There was arguments and there was others, and so on. But about 67% of those homicides was gang related, right, in the black community, and so that's why we know that a lot of the violence that's happening in our community, when you talk about homicides and shootings and things, it's tied to gangs. But many times now what is happening, because, there is a lot of young people that age and younger and older that have possession of these illegal guns. And so many times it could be a gang member, but it's not a gang rivalry. He could have just gotten an argument with someone, or as we were talking about, he dealing with his trauma and didn't feel safe and felt threatened and ended up shooting someone. It can be over drugs. It can be over a young lady. It could be many reasons, but a lot of times the nexus is this individual is involved in a gang, and that subculture of that gang activity and gang violence is tied to gun violence. And as you mentioned earlier, we're really dealing with a huge fight when you talk about trying to reduce gun violence with the hip hop community, the music and the entertainment. I think when you look on YouTube, when you look on social media, you look at all these different places, what is magnified and lifted up in the black community is not positive things, but negative things like that, like the hip hop and the drill music, talking about shooting and killing each other and things like that. And these young people, they see those things, right? And a lot of rivalries happen on social media and so on. And so in that report, when young people are saying they either saw their friend get shot or someone's getting shot at, and that's real. I talked to young people here. A young man I was working with, I think he's about 15, 16 years old. He got arrested for having a ghost gun. And I was asking him, why you have this ghost gun? He said, well, me and my friend, we got shot at and he got shot. So he said, I went in, he said, very easy for me to do it. I went and he said, I had 2 ghost guns. He said it was so easy, I thought it was legal for me to have the guns. And he got arrested with one, they didn't get the other. But he said that when I got these guns, I said, okay, let somebody run up on me now. Now he did say, now, I don't know if I would have shot him or not, he said, but that's what my mindset was back then, and so on. So it's actually true. A lot of these individuals young people are carrying these guns because they don't feel safe, right? And the reason why they don't feel safe is because of all the violence that you see. You can be mistaken, right, for if you live in a certain community and someone got shot on the other side of town and they come in to get revenge. If you just look like you belong to that community and that gang over there, they will shoot you and they will kill you. I've seen that happen many times. So you have these sometimes where it's not targeted. It's targeted but not targeted because they're not getting the right person. Sometimes people, they get shot, many things that happen, these individuals not even in the gang. And so I think a lot of times, because so much gang violence happen in our community, when we look at that, many times, at least the outer community and within our community, people begin to think that every person that gets shot or killed in our community, it was because of gangs, which many times it may not be. The person may not was in a gang, could have been an argument. The person probably was a gang member, but it was an argument that had nothing, the motive was not gang related. It was an argument, or it was over drugs, or it was over a young lady.
See, I want, because when there's some kind of mass murder and somebody with a gun goes and shoots up a whatever, they'll talk about like video games, like, hey, there's violent video games, violent computer games that kids play. And I always think to myself, come on, that's not. I'm just not buying it. I don't think that the difference between this person shooting up a mall or a movie theater or whatever, and not, is the fact that he played some kind of computer game where there was violence. And I've wondered, you talked about the hip hop community and music community, entertainment community in general. I got to tell you, a few years ago, and I've wondered, like, how much can we actually blame them? Are they, is art imitating life, or is life imitating art? Or
both.
Maybe it's a little bit of both,
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
But we were fighting hard a few years ago to keep the gun show at the Del Mar Fairgrounds.
Oh yeah, I know about that.
And the Del Mar Fairgrounds, the gun show had an impeccable safety record. You couldn't purchase a firearm without going through a background check and a 10-day wait period. It was a really great event I'd been going for at least 15 years. It'd been there for 30 years. And again, an impeccable legal and safety record. So right in the middle of that, we were getting protested, and people were coming and, hey, all this gun violence, we have to reduce gun violence, so get rid of this gun show. And at the same time, they had some kind of rap show. I forget who it was. I'm just kind of remembering this as we're talking, but it was some kind of rap or hip hop artist who had a show there, and there was a shooting. And I thought, well, where's the moms demand action? Why we're still going to allow hip hop and rap shows? Like, they don't have an impeccable, legal record. They don't have an impeccable safety record. But here we're getting rid of gun shows, and we're not addressing, this is just some kind of random problem and we'll solve it, but it's a one-off. Meanwhile, you have this gun show that hasn't caused any problems at all. And you have, this long line of protesters. And I think broadly, Pastor, it feels like you have a bunch of people in Escondido and Santee and San Marcos and Carlsbad, who are, who feel like the fingers are getting pointed at them.
Gotcha.
Where, there are communities, very small pockets of communities in San Diego that where the violence is happening. And it's like, well, wait a minute. They're committing crimes and they're breaking into houses to steal guns so that they can shoot people as the result of an argument, or some kind of illegal drug activity. And so I have to give up more of my rights and freedom. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like,
right.
How are we off? Is that not the right way to think about it? I mean, is it relatable or?
I would say, and I think this is probably where the clash comes when you talk about laws. Maybe it shouldn't be a law, but there most definitely should be some type, just like this paper that was done on young black men not feeling safe. Some type of research should be done, because when you talk about the what was it at the fair?
The gun. It was some kind of
gun show.
Yeah, it was a gun show, and
they sell guns there. So one of the things that I hear all the time, and I talk with this one professor I know, Dr. Sid Martinez. I don't know if you heard of him, but when they do their research and when they look at things many times, they say that one of the problems that we have is that when you have these gun shows, there's no way to track these guns, right? To see, and when individuals are buying these guns, where are they going, right?
And they all. So I want to be totally clear, because I can already feel my listeners yelling at their, you know what I mean?
Where to go?
So I want to be crystal clear, and this is something that we brought up a lot: is every single process and procedure that you have to go through to purchase a gun at a gun shop. It's the exact same thing at a gun show.
So you can track them.
So absolutely.
Okay.
So if you're at a gun show and you walk up to a table and say, "Hey, I want to buy this gun," then you still have to go through a dealer, a federally licensed dealer. You can't walk away with the gun that day. You have to go through a 10-day wait period. You have to go through a background check. So the exact same laws that apply to gun shops apply to these gun shows. Okay. It's almost as if, in fact, it's very similar to just taking all the gun shops and saying, "Hey, for this weekend, you guys are going to set up here at this gun show."
Gotcha.
So it's the exact same. It's the exact same. But it's just that, like I said, the contrast where you had a bunch of people, protesting and blaming. Meanwhile, I'm going to this gun show for 15 years, 5 times a year for 15 years. And I'm seeing my friends and we're hugging each other and we're saying, "Hey, check this new thing out and this new whatever and how you been and let's go get a hot dog." It's an event. It's a community event, right? And then they're going, "Well, you guys are bad. You're undesirable. You can't be. You're causing a problem, and so we're going to get rid of you, but we're still going to have this music show where they talk about killing people, they talk about hurting people, and oh, by the way, there was a shooting." And I'm going, "Well, wait a minute. I'm not the problem, So, but that being said, that doesn't mean I don't want to be part of the solution.
Right.
It's just that, blaming me, that's not, I'm not, taking things away from me and blaming me. It can't be part of the solution.
Especially if we're not talking to each other and sitting down and working things out to figure out what's to be the best approach. Because, when I think about the gun shows and so on, so I'm glad you brought that point out, because the next thing I wanted to address was then we need researchers. I don't know if you all have done it before or you have the data, but track and see, where are the guns coming from that's in our community, right? Where you have all these illegal guns, people being killed. Because I know Dr. Sid Martinez, several years ago, he did a study because he was focused on gangs. He's focused on them being arrested and like shootings, homicides, and the firearm that they had. And so he drove around with SDPD and Escondido. He went to the district attorney's office, looked at the data and so on. And what he concluded is that 50 to 60%, no, I think he said 60 to 70% of guns that gang members got arrested with and had used had come from either a residential burglary or from a family or friend of someone that had legally had a gun, and somehow they got that gun in the community. Right.
Sure.
And then he said 30 to 40% came from other states or other areas where there was more, because California has strict gun laws, had more lax laws and so on. So that was his conclusion on it. So with me, when I looked at the report, especially with the work that we're doing, is how do we stop these illegal guns from coming into our community, right? And I think there has to be accountability on both sides, right? Accountability on our side, and that's one of the things that we're trying to do is hold these young men accountable, right, for their actions, but also trying to work with them to change their behaviors. But I think also with the gun owners, right? The gun owners, those who are following the law, like you were just saying, not doing anything wrong, hold those accountable that may not be following that same principle, right? So there has to be accountability on both sides, because if not, at least from my position of the work that I do in the community, you're still going to have guns being flooded into our community. I think you do raise a good point, and I think that's important, right? When you talk about, because the thing I was thinking when you're talking about gun shows versus a gun store, right? Both of them selling guns legally and following all the laws and so on. So that really can't be the problem. Yeah. The problem has to be how do we track and find out how these guns, who are the legal dealers or those who are trying to use this fair system for their advantage and so on. I think that's kind of what my focus would be.
Yeah, and I don't even think I would go so far as to say like gun shows. For example, by the way, we lost that gun show. It's gone. It's been gone for years. Okay. And it's like, well, I don't even think. Not only was it not a problem, I think that it was in some ways, a solution. But it was chipped away at. And I want to talk about, let's kind of talk about, and I think this part of the conversation's tough, but I want to have it. And
let's do it.
I want to talk about percentages, because if it was just, I think if the only thing we were dealing with were storage laws, then I don't even know if San Diego County Gun Owners or Gun Owners Radio would even exist. You know what I mean? If that was the only thing we were dealing with. But we're talking about full-on bans on what you can own and where you can carry and the magazines you can have. And I'm hearing from people, Pastor, who are calling me up. I'm talking about grown men who have jobs, have zero criminal history, and they're calling me up in tears going, I need an attorney. I was doing something totally normal. Yeah. I was doing something totally normal in 49 other states. You know what I mean? I wasn't hurting anybody or whatever, but I've run afoul of some law that only exists in California, and I think my life is ruined. And and they'll suddenly they're becoming a felon. Suddenly they're having to take their entire life savings and pay some attorney just so they can stay out of jail. You know what I mean? And that's really, really difficult. So it's more than just like, well, gee, Mike, you can't have your cool toys anymore. Boo-hoo. No, I'm watching lives get ruined. I'm watching people, So let's talk about percentage. I'll tell you where I'm going here. Let me read a little bit of this report. The young men we interviewed shared similar perceptions of living in cities characterized by crime and violence. Over 2/3 of our study participants described their cities as a negative social environment with few opportunities. When asked to describe their city, single-word responses such as violent, dangerous, crazy We're typical. Wilmington, frequently referred to as murder town. We talked a little bit about this. The young men told us that people in the city were, quote, angry and miserable, end quote. And comments such as, if you say the wrong thing, you're dead. And that's the end of that, end quote. Underscored the sense of danger that permeates their everyday lives. Yeah. I think that I've been, by following like your Facebook page, getting to know you, following folks that do the same kind of advocacy work in your community, it's definitely opened my eyes. And I realize that you guys have legitimate complaints in areas. You know, and I've realized that people grow up, even though we're both Americans, we both grew up in the United States. People grew up in very different situations.
Yes.
And you know, I guess my question is, with that in mind, you know, and the idea of systemic racism or racism and you know, how it's caused, it still causes problems today. The fact that there's a history of slavery and Jim Crow laws and all that. I'm convinced that I've been convinced that you're right. There is an impact. Here's my question, and I don't know how to frame it any more plainly than this. I don't think it's 100% of the problem.
Right.
But I've been convinced it's not 0% of the problem.
Right.
So with this kind of response, where they say that, you know, if you do the wrong thing, you're dead, and that's that, you know, where they describe their towns as a war zone, et cetera, et cetera. These towns, it's not like you're seeing, you know, NRA members turning their towns into this. It's not like you're seeing, you know, white racists, you know, riding through town and they've turned their town. You know what I mean?
Right.
So if it's not 100% and it's not 0%, and you know, the gun owners, legal gun owners, we're not out there, you know, hurting people, you know, but their towns are still, you know, turning their experience into this horrible thing. Where, you know, is it 90%, you know, racism? Is it 10%? Like, you know what I mean? Like, how much is it this horrible legacy of racism and slavery, and how much is it like personal responsibility? Like, this is your community, you know, your folks have turned this into your community, and that's harsh to say, but I think it's something that's on the mind of folks who can't relate to it at all.
Right.
You know, we grew up, you know, in a totally different environment, and now, you know, like I said, people are saying, hey, this gun show that you like to go to, you know, it's dangerous. This hobby or this thing that you do where you own a gun and you want to carry, you know, you're part of the problem. You know what I mean? Like, fingers are pointed at us. You know, but meanwhile we're going, well, we're not even the ones there. It's not our community. We're not there. We're not doing it. So what, you know, what percentage? What, you know, can you label? Can you come up with a percentage? Or I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that is intertwined, and when you talk about personal responsibility, first thing that came to my mind is a shared responsibility, right? Yeah. Yes, first with our own community. When you talk about the black community and us, stop killing each other, right? We in our community, we don't like to use black on black crime because we believe that's even a term that was kind of framed by those who might be racist or racism, right? To use that term because you don't use it on any other race as far as when it's intra-related homicides and so on.
But I think, and I don't mean to interrupt, but you know what? I think it's a good point. I don't know if it was caused by racism. I don't know.
Right.
That. I mean, maybe it was.
Right.
And if you say it was, I believe you. But I know that when I've heard it used, it's to illustrate. It's almost a defense mechanism from folks in my community, or you know, the gun community, where we're going, wait. It's I'm not. No, this is black on black. I'm not black. Right. You know what I mean? It's kind of a defense mechanism. Right. You know, we don't want to harm anybody. We certainly don't want to harm anybody in the black community.
Right.
So the way I've seen people use the term black on black is not an attempt to be racist or even to lay blame. It's to defend, like, and say, hey, please don't blame me. I want to be part of the, the solution.
Right.
I don't want to be labeled as part of the problem.
Right.
I don't know.
And I hear what you're saying. I understand that. I think that, when you talk about blacks killing blacks, it's most definitely a shared responsibility. We have to take care of our own community first and make sure that we're doing what we need to do. But there is, it's not like back in the Jim Crow and things like that, but we're still dealing with systems, right? And I think your op-ed, brilliantly, spelled that out and made it clear how we're dealing with this, right? And so when you talk about systemic racism, structural racism, individual racism, whatever type of racism you want to look at when it comes to our community, and you're dealing with being marginalized, you're dealing with, to a certain degree, a sense of oppression and things like that, I believe it plays a major role from I don't know what percentage when you talk about percentages, but one of the things that we can do and we can look at, and I think you spelled it out clearly, we can look at the prisons, right, and see who's locked up and who's there, right? Black people are not the only people that commit crimes, but most of the time it's our community that's over police. And even I've talked to individuals that are white and grew up in white communities, right? And they even told me, like, hey, the way blacks are treated in their community and the way they're stopped and the way their cars are searched and things like that for these, what you would say, illegal guns or what have you, you have the same thing going on in the white community, but they're not like doing the same thing to that degree. I know they're doing it because I got an argument with Chief Nislife when he was chief about that. Because we go everywhere. We arrest them out in La Jolla, everywhere else if they have illegal guns. And so, but one of the folks, when you look at the data, when you look at the stats, black people are overwhelmingly arrested, overwhelmingly put in county jail. We only make up 5 to 6% in the region and the city of San Diego, but yet it's somewhere between 28% of folks in the jails. You have almost I believe 30-something% 20-something% of blacks in the state prison, where they only make up about 6% of the population. So when you look at that, even on a national level, right, almost 50% of folks, 50% of folks in prison are black. So we know that, and not saying that they don't deserve to be there, right? I do know that people do get arrested, they get life in prison for things that they didn't do. I know people right now in prison for some things that they didn't do. So we do know that a lot of time that these arrests, the over-policing of our communities is tied into our race and systemic racism and the history of that. Like you went to slavery and Jim Crowism and so on and so forth. A lot of times when new laws come in, and I think you made a good point, because back then she was our council member Montgomery Stepp. Yeah. And now she's county board of supervisor. That was one of the issues she raised when we talk about safe storage and things like that. She had is like, we want to make sure that whatever laws are passed on this, that it's not going to be primary focus in our community a lot. Even when we had that conversation about the gun violence restraining order, right, and so on, and and I reached out to city attorney. I want to know, with this, why so many black people are being arrested for this, and so on, and so forth. And they said they just following the complaints, not so much singing out people and so on. But we know that when you talk about systems, it's all tied together, right? When you talk about guns, the lack of resources in our community, and the marginalization of our community, the education system is failing our young people and so on. But I think that even though you have all these issues that's tied into race, we do have a responsibility, ourselves as black people, a shared responsibility to work together to heal our community and do for ourselves. But at the same time, we're all Americans. So what I would say when we talk about that shared responsibility, I don't expect no one else to care for me unless I care for myself. But when we do that, like you reached out, it's a shared responsibility, so let's work together also in our comeback and our fight for that. But not only that, but let's have this conversation like we're having and continue to have those conversations, because I learned, right? I had big issues with SDPD and law enforcement, but I would sit down and have these conversations with them, and I learned things from them, right? They would share things, even about safe storage and things. Yeah. I would talk to them about, so what do you think about this? Is this good? Is this bad? Or what would you want to do, and things like that. And a lot of times their thing is that, at least some of the ones I talked to, is that people are not going to report it if the gun was stolen and it wasn't safely stored and things like that. Because I think you have to report it or to be a crime and things like that. So but the point is, I listen and I want to learn, right? I don't know everything. And you're the expert when it comes to dealing with gun ownership and the Second Amendment and things like that. And I'm just the expert in dealing with my community and knowing that, we have a lot of violence, we have a lot of homicides, we have a lot of crime that's happening in our community. And a lot of this is tied into personal responsibility and the way a person makes decisions. That's why we go to these individuals to get them to start taking responsibility and to think for themselves and to move from negative behavior to positive behavior. And that's why we're doing what we're doing. And especially when you talk about these young people. But the thing of it is, and what I would say to your listeners and everyone is that we lack the resources to really, even our program, right, or what we're trying to do, because we're dealing with poor people. We don't have a lot of resources in our community, and we don't have a lot of funding and different things like that comes to our community. They help us to be able to do these things. And, our website, you can go to www.shafat.org, and you'll see the data on the No Shots Fired program of all the things that we have done to disrupt violence, all the things we've done to help people change their lives around, right? So our program is effective and it works, right? But the main thing about it is that we lack those resources, right? And so that's part of the problem. Then the other thing I would say, at least with San Diego, the struggle that we have in really trying to make a dent into this crime and this violence and so on, is that San Diego's a pretty safe city. Yeah. And so when you're going for statewide or federal grants or what have you, they looking at Baltimore.
Yeah, right.
They looking at these other places. Oh, we need. And then my thing is, you pouring all these resources in, but you still having the same problem. Yeah. Why don't you look at programs that are effective and making things happen and continue to support them so they can continue? At least I think they earned it, right? And I'm not saying neglect that, but I think too much resources being poured into these communities, and yet you still have the same problem. Even with Chicago, you got a lot of resources being poured into that community, but you still have the problem there. Even though certain programs or certain communities there, they have helped and made some difference and some changes, but overall, so all I'm saying is that when you have a program that works and when you have a program that's effective, right, and has demonstrated that they can reduce gun violence, why not look at that program as a model and why not support that program so we can continue to do that and then help other cities and other states?
Well, because, by the way, the op-ed that you're referring to summarize the op-ed I wrote, was that California has a disproportionate number of gun laws, than other states. And those disproportionately, those gun laws are used disproportionately against black and brown men under 40.
Right.
And that what the result is that they are being prosecuted for gun crime way more often. Yes. And they're being and their sentences are being extended. And it's ruining the community. Yes. That is the exact. Whether you believe in systemic racism or not, that's the exact definition of systemic racism. Right. So when they talk about systemic racism, they're talking about exactly that.
Yeah, and I know there's a lot, and I hear it all the time myself. I know there's a lot of people that will say that, right? It's not racism, it's individual choice. And I believe it's both, but I don't want to blame racism, right? I don't want to blame that. We know those issues are there. They've been there for a good while, but what has been done, right, with all what they do to address these issues, or what has really been done to help our community. So I really believe that we have to do it for ourselves in our own community, and we are doing it, right? And like I said before, we just it's a shared responsibility, so we need more support.
Well, I think that one of the problems with getting more support is that you won't get more support from like half the county, because they view it as they're trying to take my gun rights away.
Gotcha.
You know what I mean? And I think that is there a way, can we give lectures on how to start a business, how to maintain a business? Is there a lecture on, how to get into, the trades and get a better, I don't know, what I mean? Some kind of economic help, some kind of, mentorship, some kind of, some kind of program that has absolutely nothing to do with guns, And in the folks who are standing, side by side, who are for, more restrictive gun laws, I call them anti-gunners. Maybe they don't like that. They probably don't. But the groups that, that are there working with you who want more restrictive gun laws, if they're sincere, then great. If they're still helping the community, you know what I mean? Like if they're helping the community by doing these non-gun related, ways of helping, then they'll pitch right in and do it too.
Right.
If they're not sincere, they're going, well, wait a minute, we're really just reaching out to you because you help us ban more guns.
Right.
You know what I mean?
You're absolutely right. Yeah.
But
good point.
There has to be, if we've identified that there are a small number of communities that have this huge problem, and that the problem isn't the average gun owner, and that the problem really isn't necessarily guns, that the problem is that, that they're solving problems. According to this report, they're solving problems in very unhealthy and horrible, dangerous ways. They're making a living in illegal and horrible, dangerous ways. If that's the problem, then let's go solve that problem rather than say, hey, you know what we're going to do is we're going to go make sure that, when somebody does break into a gun owner's house, that they have to, not only do they have to get through the lock on the door, but they also got to get through a safe or whatever. You know what I mean? Like wait a minute, like let's actually try to solve the problem. It feels like we're not going after what really needs to happen here. It feels like this gun issue has kind of been dumped in your lap, and it like you said, the vast majority of homicides, where gang members, that sort of thing in your community, I'm sure there's a gun used. I'm positive that's the truth. So it makes sense that they'd that they'd home in on your issue and whatever. But it feels like that there is a real solution out there that isn't being as that isn't being attacked as hard as it could be. I mean, I think that if I talked to 100 gun owners and said, hey, we want to go help these folks who are going to grow up to be gang members or whatever, we want to help them avoid that, I think they'd be all for it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They'd say, great, let's do that. Yeah. There's a group called Boys to Men that we support.
I heard about them.
With Joe Sigurdsson, where he tells me 80% of the people that go through his program don't have a dad. Yeah. And that they're just angry young boys. Yeah. They're angry teenagers. They're just angry. Yeah. They don't even know why. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I'm a big supporter of that. I don't know. What do you think, man? What is a path going forward?
Yeah, for sure. Let me say this is that when I'm in my community and when we're addressing gangs and gun violence and so on, never once will you hear come out of my mouth, it's the gun owners' problem, right? We know what the problem is, and we focus on that problem. Yeah. And the problem is the individuals with those guns. I think that, the gun itself is not going to take somebody's life, but I do believe that if you get the wrong person and have a gun in their hand, right, that's where life can be lost. So we have to address both, not from the perspective of taking gun owners' guns, because that's not. If you have a gun, I don't care what kind it is. I'm not trying to take. I don't want to fight to take your gun from you. I want you to be safe and have your gun. But what I do want, though, is I want to keep and prevent these illegal guns, wherever they're coming from, into my community. But I also want to deal with the individual, right, to help them to change their life and turn their life around. To not, what's the motive, right? Why do you think you need a gun? And we know what they don't feel safe and things like that. I grew up in that community. I'm a former gang member myself. I was a part of, we started a lot of I was there when the gun violence started. We started all that violence that's happening in our community now. And that's why I'm trying to come back and give back is because I understand that culture. I was a part of that culture of violence and so on. God saved me and changed my life around December 5th, 1984. So I've been out of it for a good while. I was 22 years old, so I was within that range.
Wow, yeah.
I was 22 years old when I actually got out of the gang lifestyle and so on. And so now I'm trying to go back to help our young people to change their life. And so some of the things that I pointed out in regards to what our program do, that's how you make the difference. I think what you brought up is important too, right? When you talk about trades and when you talk about economics and things like that, and we collaborate with, my son has an organization called Core 6, and that's one of the things that they do. They do entrepreneurships and they work with people on manage their finances and so on, and into investments and things like that. So we got these things happening and going on in our community and things like that. But it's small in scope, right? Because of the resources that you need. So just like you would support the Red Cross or Blue Cross or one of these huge organizations, I would like to see some of these celebrities funnel, instead of these huge organizations all the time, funnel that money down to organizations that's grassroots, that's really with boots on the ground, that's out there trying to make these things happen and so on.
Actually solve the problem.
Yeah, exactly. Right. But we're not, and I want to make that clear. I know some groups are that way, but I'm not here to take or try to even get a law passed to take guns from any gun owner. I got friends, I got family members that legally have guns, right, and possess those guns and so on. The only reason why I don't have a gun is because I was part of the violence and all the trauma. I'm just too scared to have one. But that's just me as an individual choice that I made. But I have a lot of people, even friends who have felonies and so on. They still have guns. So the thing of it is, you're not going to a certain degree, be able to get all these guns out of our community. I had another chief to tell me that he said there's so many guns in our community, even if you just made a law that no one can have guns anymore, it ain't going to do nothing. It's not going to make no bit of difference.
I would, people like me would give up my gun, you know what I mean? Because I follow the law, and I'm not out there hurting anybody, which is, but now I'm left vulnerable.
Right, exactly.
Well, I thought this was super interesting. Pastor, I appreciate you very much. And I very much appreciate you coming in and giving me the time and the discussion. I wanted to really talk about this study because I think that there was so much more to the study. They put this big scary gun on the front of the study and pretend,
I saw that.
You know what I mean? And
I saw that.
This study is so much more than just guns, but guns are a hot topic and draws attention. But anyway, I very much appreciate you coming in and talking to me, man. And I appreciate everything that you do for your community. And let's keep talking, because I would love to figure out more that we can do that doesn't compromise our principles and our beliefs, but does help San Diego,
right?
And helps what you're trying to accomplish.
Absolutely, and I know that you have your trolls out there, right, on both sides,
right?
And I understand that, but I would say that besides that, I think that like when you mentioned the gun on there, that's a trigger for both sides, right?
Right.
Because one is, hey, you try to take my gun, you try to put this thing, look at this is the problem, and then the other is saying, no, this is the problem.
Right.
And so it's a trigger for all sides. But I think that if we can really, really, really try to understand each other, learn from each other, right?
Yeah.
And find a medium to where that we can work together. And so I believe we can, because we've already working together and doing some things, and I believe we can do
successfully,
more. Right. And that was one of the things that I was thinking in regards to when you was talking about coming in doing some type of economic class, things like that. We have these seasons of peace where we do a lot of education in our community and community empowerment. And whatever topic you think is needful that our community needs to hear, whether it's about guns or what have you, we can have set up a platform where you can come in and do that education and do that training piece or whatever what needs to be done.
You have my commitment. We'll talk and we'll figure it out.
Absolutely.
Okay, cool. All right, great. Pastor, thank you.
What's
the website one more time?
www.shafat.org.
Okay, fantastic.
Cornelius?
Yeah.
If I could just have a moment real quick.
Sure.
I've seen you work with these men and women. I just want to commend you and thank you for what you're doing, because I see you have a heart, you have a talent. It's not just a job.
Thank you.
I think you're doing amazing work.
Thank you. And thank you for all you do, too.
Thank you.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, we have another guest here that we're going to talk about. So I'm gonna say goodbye and thank you so much.
Yes.
Thank you, Cornelius. Appreciate you, bud. And I'll talk to you very, very soon.
Okay.
Thank you so much for coming and opening yourself up like this. So again, you can go right out that door there. So I'll talk to you soon. Have a good Happy New Year. Okay.
Thank you.
All right, man.
I'll check you all out. This one?
Yep. And then just go. Yeah, just walk right down that aisle. There you go. All right, that was interesting. I enjoyed that conversation very, very much. I think that was a good conversation to have, and it's not the end. It's not the end of the conversation, and hopefully it will continue to be a fruitful effort, which it already has been. But I really, truly have for those listening, and I'm going to introduce my next guest here in just a minute, and I'm looking forward to talking to him. But I really, truly have had folks threaten me, call me up, send me emails and voicemails and texts and emails and, you name it, threats from both sides, from people who don't want me to talk to black people and from black people who don't want me to reach out to their community. I mean, it's been ridiculous. I'm at the point where I just don't care. I'm going to continue to do the right thing. Because I think it is the right thing to do. And I think that the more we have conversations that are honest and open and unafraid, I think the better we're going to do. And, helping with the community and helping specifically Pastor Bowser, that's something that I want to do for the Second Amendment. But I also, I just think it's being a good person. I think it's just being a respectable individual. There are problems. Is it in the community that I grew up in? No, it's not. I can't really relate to, what they're experiencing, but that doesn't mean I don't want to help. So, I'm passionate about the Second Amendment. I've dedicated my entire life to it, or dedicated my professional life to it. And so that's certainly one of the big motivators, but that's not the only motivator. Okay, let's go to our next guest. Our next guest, his name is Michael Ware, and he is with the Iowa Firearms Coalition. He has also dedicated his life to the Second Amendment and fighting for your right to keep and bear arms, and he has been extremely successful, and he has done a lot of really great things. So without further ado, let's welcome him. Michael, how are you, sir?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having. Hey, fantastic guest you have with Cornelius. I really enjoyed that conversation. And to be honest with you, it's exactly where I would start. I mean, what do you do in communities to subvert the idea of the gun eventually becoming a problem? I thought it was a fascinating guest, and I'm really glad you're talking about it.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. He's, like we said during the interview, he's somebody we've done a lot with each other. We've tried to find common ground and overlapping circles and more that we can do that's constructive for everybody. And I just think he's a great guy. Somebody who's turned his life around and done a lot of really great things. And so, yeah, thank you very much. So you talk about what's it like being so that's what it's like being a Second Amendment advocate here in San Diego. What's it like being a Second Amendment advocate in Iowa? What's the give us the lay of the land.
Well, it appears, and you're going to have to help me with this. I did a lot of research so that I would be ready for your interview and be valuable for your viewers, your listeners. But it appears as if being a Second Amendment advocate in Iowa, juxtaposed to California, it's exponentially better here and exponentially worse. I know that sounds like a little bit of a cop-out, but the truth of the matter is what we're really talking about here is enjoying a pretty high level of success in the last 15 years. When I got started in Second Amendment advocacy, it was, well, I guess I shouldn't be ashamed to tell you, it was almost purely out of butthurt. I'm not kidding you. I had gone to ask for a permit to carry because Iowa was a May issue state at that point. And I had done that on my birthday for 6 years in a row. And I happened to reside in a county where the sheriff, for political reasons, always said no. And I accepted that. And I left every year. And The 7th year, I think it was, it just struck me wrong. It was kind of like you got popped in the nose, right? You're just angry.
Yeah.
And so I left, and I'm like, in full disclosure, I have a Type 7 FFL, and I build really important, very big, fully automatic pieces of weaponry, right?
Wow.
And at that time, I was building a series of 20 millimeter rifles, capable of shooting miles, right? And so I thought, the federal government licenses me, whether I like it or not. I don't happen to like that stuff either, but I pay for these licenses and I do this kind of work. And this, with respect, Tin Horn Sheriff is saying I can't carry a handgun. So I couldn't balance that equation. I couldn't do it. And so I went back to the sheriff's office and I said, I want to talk to the sheriff. And she's like, why? That lady at the counter. And I said, because this is patently wrong and I want to visit with him about it. I elected him. He works for me on some level. If I need to schedule an appointment, I will, but I want to talk to him. And she's like, don't bother. It's not going to work. And I said, okay. So then I left, and I had never before paid any attention to House reps or senators. It wasn't something that I cared about. I didn't know anything about it. So I got on the state's website. I did a little snooping around, found the guy I needed to talk to, called, at that time his name was Senator Black. I called him up, and I am ashamed of this now, but I really tore him up. I read him the riot act, and I said, I don't think you guys know what you're doing, and this is patently wrong, and you're going to need to answer for this. One thing led to another. The county sheriff doesn't like getting tuned up. He called me, said, you need to come over here, and I think we could work something out. So he wanted me to write down something about keeping large quantities of money, and he was going to restrict my permit to like validity having $500 in cash on me or more, or whatever. And I said, so you've assigned the value of human life in this county statewide as $500. Is that what you're doing? I didn't say that. And I said, well, that's what this permit says. So I said, I'm going to write down.
Let me interrupt you for a second too. I want to talk about that point, because so far you and I had a very similar experience when it comes to getting into the Second Amendment, and because same thing, CCW, the sheriff, whatever. And I had a very similar experience where it was basically kind of started going down that road of like, well, we'll get you one to shut you up, But what they don't get is it wasn't about me and it wasn't about you. It was so much deeper than that. It was about the whole concept. It was about our fellow Americans. It was about, the principle, and the whole thing, right? I mean, it wasn't just like, well, gee golly, I want what I want, and, I don't care about everybody else. It was, I'm living in this country. I have these rights. I have this, and you're some elected bureaucrat, but still a bureaucrat, and you're playing with people's natural rights like this, and like you said, assigning a dollar amount to it. I don't think that I don't think enough people on the other side particularly understand that it isn't about me and my individual wants. It's about the life I live. It's about my community. It's about so much more than that. And anyway, keep going though. I just wanted to interject because I really respect where you were going with that.
You're so right. So I sat down with a guy, and he wanted to give me on the application. You could write down your justification for having asked for the permit. Well, admittedly, when I walked in there, that mind frame put me way outside of my comfort zone, and I was feeling pretty saucy as it was. Now, I wasn't snippy or inappropriate with the man. I still respect the office, whether I happen to like him very much personally or not. So he says, well, you need to write this down for your justification. And I think that this might work. And I said, I'm not doing that. I'm going to write down demonstrated responsibility. And he's like, what's that mean? And I said, you're going to give me a background check. You're not even going to you'll find some speeding tickets. I used to have a lead foot when I was a pup, right? But you won't find anything in the last several years, not even a seatbelt ticket. And so I said, I'm going to write down my demonstrated responsibility. I'm not a felon. I don't, wallop on people. I'm not doing things that are inappropriate. This is either going to work for you or it's not. And you're either going to issue this permit or you won't. And he said, well, don't you want a permit? I said, I want to leave here having talked with you, and I have. I'm leaving now, and you're going to process this, and I'll see how it comes out. And 2 weeks later, I got a phone call, come pick up your permit. And in that time, I had cooled down. But the fact that I got the permit after having the gumption to call a state senator, tune him up, and then go and sit down with the sheriff and tune him up, told me that there is no way. I did at that time, and I think I have to some degree still, the gift of gab. I was a career sales guy, and I was upset and willing to act. Okay, you add all those things together, and that's what it took for me to get some little piece of paper permit to exercise an inalienable right, protected in the Constitution. That's presuppositional by our Creator, right? And so I thought, if that's what it takes for me to get that, there's no possibility that my neighbors will achieve this. There's no possibility that most of my friends and family will ever accomplish this task. And so their ability to practice self-defense legally will boil down to whether they happen to be in a red county or a blue county. And that's patently wrong. And so I was mad then after I got my permit than I was before. And I thought, I've got to do something about this. I can't sit on my hands. So I found a Second Amendment advocacy group. At that time, it was called Iowa Carry. And they were dedicated to changing may issue to shall issue. And I started volunteering with them. And gosh, I think that was 2004. And so after a number of years and NRA stepping in to help and a bunch of things, 5 years later, we changed the law. Or 6 or whatever it was. I don't lose track now. And then we rebadged because our membership asked us to the Iowa Firearms Coalition, and we've been chipping away at things ever since. So I started because something clicked, and I followed that passion, and here we are.
That's awesome. So that is a huge success story, and congratulations. That's awesome. That's very awesome. And then since then, we'll talk about this in a minute, but since then, you've moved from may issue, which in most cases sounds like it was no issue, to shall issue, which means they have to issue. And now I believe Iowa's become the 19th state to be constitutional carry.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So, I mean, you guys have come a long way in just about 20 years. I mean, that's amazing. So congratulations.
We didn't have anything back then. I mean, we have suppressors, SBS, SBR now, constitutional carry, stand your ground. Our preemption law is arguably among the very best. It's a gold standard in the nation. We actually were tried on that. IFC was sued and one of our members, and we won swimmingly on a First Amendment basis and a Second Amendment basis, both in court not long ago. So there is case law now to back up our preemption statute. I mean, you go down the line, and it's that they can't publish people's permits or information. I mean, you can carry on stun guns and that kind of stuff on campuses. There's no magazine bans. We got rid of all that stuff. So there's a myriad of other things, but it's gone well. And
so Iowa must be a war zone then. You guys must it must be impossible to leave your house with you're just allowed to carry. If you're just allowed to carry, without special permission from the government, and you have a suppressor, and I mean, it must just be a war zone every day of the week. Every neighborhood must be completely unsafe. Is that what Iowa looks like these days?
You don't have to wear rubber boots because the streets are curb deep in blood. No, it's not quite that bad. And what's funny about our permit to carry, which I still advocate for. I mean, there's some things that permits allow you some recognition in other states, and certainly an exemption to the guns-free school zone national law, federal law. So you need to be careful about that. But the Iowa's permit to carry has never been weapon or weapon type specific. I mean, you can carry openly, you can carry concealed, you can carry a sword, you could carry, I don't know if it would apply, I assume a bazooka, machine gun, anything that you want. It doesn't matter.
Oh, no.
I mean,
actually, don't show that live. We're live, so don't show it. They'll shut us down. Yeah, they'll shut us down.
I didn't know that.
Well, YouTube's
got
this.
So I'm the reason you just got thrown off the air? Okay.
Well, did we just get thrown off?
No.
Okay, we're good. So if you record a gun and put it on YouTube, they're fine with it. If you show a gun live on YouTube, then they get all nervous and they might throw us off. But
I didn't know that. Thank goodness it was just parts.
Yeah, it's in between Christmas and New Year's, so I'm assuming all the YouTube employees are off this week, so they probably didn't see it. But anyway, it's been successful though. It's been a successful thing. You guys haven't seen blood in the streets and and a huge influx of crime, and it hasn't turned into the wild, wild west, right?
No, nothing like that at all. It's been very good overall. And I think that what we've found, because Iowa doesn't have near as many people as California does. I mean, maybe in your neighborhood, you have more folks than Iowa has total. I mean, I think we're just a shade over 3 million people in the state. But what happened with a lot of those things is because of the news coverage, the education went out, more people were starting to take training courses, more people started delving into Second Amendment advocacy and their personal responsibility, and not much different than my decision to get involved. A lot of people have decided, I need to know more about this. And as a result, they have willingly opted into the kinds of training and the personal responsibilities that we always believed that they would, and that have been present in other states. It's no different for you guys in California. I'm sure that people come to the range and they start learning once they're interested, and they retain that responsibility. I mean, I have people ask me the same questions that you're going to get out there. Why do you want to carry a gun? Why do you want to do this? I'm like, I'm not too worried about things, and maybe this is why, maybe not. But oh, by the way, once you decide that you're going to carry, you start becoming the most careful person in the room. Well, why is that? Well, because every conflict I could get into is by definition an armed conflict, and I'm not interested in that. Yeah. So typically what you see from guys like me, guys like you, is when there's a problem, we assess and start walking backwards. There's no reason to be involved in a lot of things because there's skirmishes that just get more complex. So what do? We say, these are two guys that are hollering over whether USC is the place that they want to send their kid or not. And the next thing you know, it turns into something else. Well, do I need to be part of that? No, I leave. So I think that you elevate your responsibility.
I think there's a piece too that I think that I don't know. I'm curious to know what your thoughts are on this, but I've definitely had the exact same thought. Like, hey, I got a gun. This guy's cutting me off in traffic or whatever. This guy, I don't want to be a part of this, But I think that there's a calming piece too. I think when you don't have when you're not carrying and you've never carried, before I got a carry permit and before I was able to actually carry every day, I didn't know how I was going to defend myself. There was an anxiety there. There was if everything goes wrong right now, what do I do? All I got is my left and my right hand. Can I flee fast enough? Does this guy know more jujitsu and, whatever, you know what I mean? So there was this anxiety of not being prepared, of not being able to handle a situation if it did go wrong. Whereas I think if you carry and train, any situation, if you're better prepared, I think you're a lot calmer in that situation. And I definitely have noticed that, hey, look, there are very few situations that I'm not prepared for anymore, particularly a serious situation where I would need, lethal force. So I think that there's a calming effect, there's a rational effect on people who are trained in carrying. They don't really think about, so that when things do start to go sideways or go haywire or whatever, that you're calmer, you get less excited. You think to yourself, look, if this person's starting to escalate, I don't have to worry about that. All I have to do is turn around and leave or whatever. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
I completely agree. Now, in my personal experience, I wouldn't say to you that I was totally complacent and completely ignorant, but apparently I was close. So I thought that I was paying attention to what was going on around me, and it turns out that I really wasn't doing that great a job. So after taking some training and really delving into things like situational awareness, mental prep, the self-defense basics that don't have anything to do with the actual weapon itself. I found myself better equipped to stay out of trouble or recognize it and preempt it, usually by leaving or whatever else. But I have been trying for years now to instill that in my kids. I've got a daughter who's 15 and a son who's 11. My son is just now entering into this in a bigger degree. But for years, I've told my daughter, I'm like, we're going to go in this gas station. Don't be obvious. Look around, and I want you to show me 3 things that you notice. And I don't care what they are. You can pay attention to a sale item or how many Snickers bars there were. I don't care. The price of gas, it doesn't make any difference. And then when we get out to the truck and we leave, we'll compare stories. And the first time I did that, we were in kind of I wouldn't say a rough neighborhood, but it wasn't the best. And it was an acceptable time of day for crazy things to happen. So I kept my head on a swivel. But we got back out there, and she recognized there were a couple of policemen in there that were standing there, and she recognized their badge numbers, the price of fuel. And she also noticed there was a crappy old yellow Ford truck with a blue tarp in it. And the guy sat there, never got any fuel the whole time we were there. Inside, came back out and kept monkeying around with it and coming back, although he was parked at a fuel island. She observed all those things without me trying to make her paranoid or make her afraid, which is not what I was doing. And so that's how we started. So now, today, when we go in places, it doesn't matter. I mean, I would rather die than go to the mall. But if we go into the department store, sorry, I can't do it. It's just not something I'm able to do anymore. But when we go in places, let's say we go into a lumberyard or whatever, I'm like, okay, I have an expectation that you give me the name of not 1, not 2, but 3 names on the little, vests or whatever these people are wearing. I want you to know where we entered the building. Where's the likely place to get out? If you don't see it, it's obvious. And oh, by the way, if you go out of the exit we came in or an alternative exit, what's autonomously the direction that you're going to go in order to make it back to our vehicle as a rally point? And just things like that. Well, why would I need to know that, Dad? I said, well, maybe there's blood or snot or smoke in your eyes. Maybe the place is on fire. You need to know where to go. So think through that. Don't be scared. This isn't paranoia 101. This is preparedness. Yeah. And oh, by the way, if you can't do that, that's okay. You can sit in the car next time while I go in and think about it. So she's got incentives to pay attention. And now she's with her group of friends when they go to the football games and the volleyball games or whatever else. We have Iowa State season tickets. And so she's paying attention and she's teaching her friends, Dad wants me to look at these things. And so help me out here and maybe we can find some stuff. And so that's how you start, a situational awareness, and then you build on it from there. And I believe that when we handle ourselves like that, that you're arguably less likely to be a victim. I mean, you know how this works. These bad guys make the last 30 or 40 feet when mom's got a baby in one arm and sacks in the other, and goes gwink gwink with the key fob, and then she's paying attention to the trunk or the back seat or trying to get this kid in the SUV while they're crying. All kinds of calamity happens. And so when they hit that button and they open that door, they should snap their head back up and look around. And you know how this works. People are going to be like, not my mark. I'm going to move on to the next one. So I believe it starts with things like that. And those are the foundation that actually precede weapon use. And I know that you know that. So I think that these are vital components that we should be using regardless of whether we carry or not. It just seems to be enhanced with carry.
So all these things are going great in Iowa, and it sounds like they are. And that's a very cool and effective way to teach your kids, to be aware, like you said, not be afraid or paranoid, but to be aware. All those things are going right. It sounds like, if California had half of what you had, we'd be so deliriously happy. So what's going wrong? What you said that in some ways you're better, but in some ways you're worse. How is Iowa worse with all that wind to your back? How is it worse?
Well, I'll tell you, it's I'm not afraid to admit this. With success comes a great deal of complacency.
Yeah.
And so rather than having tons of engagement and people out there with a fist of solidarity in the air, you don't get as much of that as what you think. Sometimes they sit back and they put their feet up on the coffee table and say, well, it's all good.
Yeah.
And
I'm afraid. I think that's happening I'm seeing that with the post-Trump election. You know, like within days of Trump being elected, I started getting emails or whatever from folks that were just like, well, that problem solved. We're good. Everything's okay. Don't have to do anything now. And that's
Well,
such a dangerous thing.
it's beyond dangerous. It's the exact opposite of what we should be doing. When you see a president elect like Trump come in and say, "I'm going to do this, this, and this," what you end up finding out is that's probably going to require a lot of cooperation from a House and Senate. And if you remember, he had a number of years back to do that. Not a lot of significant things regarding anything that I specifically care about came to fruition. So I'm looking at this saying, well, I think he learned some lessons. He wants to avoid some of the swamp stuff. And oh, by the way, I think that you'll see the swamp folks, which are included with R's at the end of their name, just like D's or whatever else. I think you'll see that they want to save their own rumps, that they're less invested in draining swamp than what you may believe. And so I'm not confident that a lot will get done without people like us absolutely screaming, "We put you there and we'll send you someplace else. I have an expectation that you get this done. And oh, by the way, I'm saying this to you in email. I'm saying this to you on social media. I'm going to be at your legislative coffee on Saturday morning, and I'm going to say this in front of everybody as I live stream it. So you can either help me out and I can help you, or I'm going to become a thorn in your side." What's it going to be?
How do you, with the organization, how do you handle partisanship? Because I am not partisan. I'm not Republican. I'm sure as heck not Democrat, and I get a lot of flack for that. You know, when I criticize Republicans when they're wrong, I criticize Democrats when they're wrong, and I get a lot of flack when I turn on Republicans. It would be so easy to just kind of toe the Republican line. You know, we wouldn't get as much done. You know, we wouldn't be as effective. We wouldn't be as sincere an organization. But man, people would just, it makes them feel warm. You know, they get this warm feeling when I just tell them that, hey, everything's all right. Just vote for a Republican. We're all okay here. You know, but the reality is that's not, you know, accurate. So how is it in Iowa, and how is it with your organization when it comes to, you know, partisan politics?
It changes. I mean, we aren't a partisan organization in any fashion, but I can't deny that there were no Democrats that we supported this last election cycle. At the moment, there don't happen to be very many Democrats in Iowa's legislature or in elected positions on a state level. But the truth of the matter is, if we rewind back to that 2009 change from may to shall issue, it was a Democrat governor, a Democrat House, and a Democrat Senate. It was a trifecta of Democrats, and they worked with us because of yelling and screaming, and not inappropriate, mind you, but lots and lots of pressure. And we brought the noise level up to the point where these guys were like, I can't listen to any more of this stuff. I can't take any more emails. I can't stand many people standing up in my Saturday morning coffees and boobing about this anymore. We've got to make this go away. And I think they did it probably not because they were Second Amendment advocates, but they wanted us to shut up and go away. I really believe that was the lion's share of the idea there. And so we've worked with Democrats since then. 2 years ago, I think we had some Democrat support. Now, interestingly, in the last legislative session, which we're about to start ours, Iowa goes from January to roughly April, and then we're done for the year. Last year, we had a number of Democrats come on board for Republican originated and backed bills. Now, they were not heavy lifts and serious work, but we did have Democrat votes, and I was glad to see that. But when it comes to, do you agree with this premise, and this premise? We don't have, at the moment, any Democrats saying yes to the core ideology in the Second Amendment. So we're in kind of a pickle. We'll work with anybody who'll work with us, and always have. But right now, there doesn't seem to be anybody that wants to sponsor a bill or speak favorably on the floor.
Well, and I think that's an important point. I mean, I would absolutely. It would be dishonest if I said that, you know, Republicans traditionally have been far better friends to us than Democrats. But I think the important point is you can't pull punches, just because Republicans in general have been better friends. You can't let them get away with anything. You can't say, hey, I'm not going to criticize this person because they're a Republican. I'll let them vote for this, whatever, magazine ban, but, generally they've been, no. I think, you got to, at least we've made a point of standing up and saying, hey, if it's wrong, it's always wrong, whether you're a Republican or a Democrat. If it's right, it's always right, whether you're a Republican or a Democrat. I don't think we endorsed a Democrat in this last election either. But 2 years ago we did. We endorsed a Democrat for sheriff, and she won, and she's been a really great friend to us. But I don't, on our survey, when we send out a questionnaire, we didn't even ask if they're Republicans or Democrats. We don't really care. But it's definitely, it's something, there are definitely a lot more people are hung up on R versus D than I anticipated. And I'm not saying I'm not necessarily saying they're, I get it. Like, I get why. If you're looking out across the battlefield, it's pretty obvious in general who your friends are and who your enemies are, and what color their flag is. But I think it's important to change. It's important to, if you want to change your enemies into friends, then you got to reward them when they do the right thing, and blast their enemies when they do something wrong.
Well, what you're really saying is we're less concerned, at least for the purposes of this foundational idea, we're less concerned with the Second Amendment in this realm, with this particular precept, than we are the pursuit of truth. So if we decide that at its heart it has to have truth, then, and we agree that that's what we need, then this isn't your truth, my truth. It's the truth, the moral, objective truth. And when we get to the bottom of that, and we evaluate candidates and their intentions and their actions based on that, then the R's and D's tend to evaporate. And I think that that's the best way to handle this across the board. Now, legislators, elected officials inherently don't like that, because they want to, they value loyalty above truth. Yeah. And that creates a fundamental trust problem. So there's only about so far that you can actually go with some folks, because at their hearts, they don't have as much respect for the truth as we ought to. And that's always going to be a problem.
Do you have a favorite story about a politician that maybe double crossed you or didn't live up to what they said they'd do, or anything like that? You got a good story about that?
We usually don't find that a lot, and that hasn't been my personal experience. And I have some tremendous personal relationships with legislators that I'm very happy about, that transcend politics. I mean, my accountability partner in Christ is the majority leader of the Iowa House, and Representative Winshittel's his name. And I refer to him as Matt because he's my good friend and we're there for one another. But we're able to divorce ourselves from advocacy work versus, hey, I've got this problem. Can I run through some scripture with you? And that works. So I know what that's like. I don't have many horror stories. What I usually have, and I'm not too proud to avoid talking about this. Usually what I have are fundamental problems with how I've handled something more than the legislators.
Really? Talk about that. I think that'd be good for people to hear. Like what expand on that. What have you learned, and what have you changed about the way you handle things?
I had a mentor, and he's still a really good friend and mentor to me today. And it's the same thing that my dad said. And my dad died just a couple months ago. And
very sorry for your loss.
Very, very kind. Thank you. And my dad had basically said the same thing to me as many times, but not quite in this way. This buddy of mine said, listen, Michael, if you want to build the tallest building in town, as it regards the Second Amendment, he said, you have two choices. He's like, you can work your butt off and you can add floors and you can make this huge skyscraper, right? And I said, yes, I understand that. He said, or you could swing a wrecking ball and artificially knock everybody else's building down, which gives you the superficial appearance of being tall. And he said, and you have to decide right now, which is it that you're going to do, because you can't do both. And so I thought about that for the longest time, and I thought I knew what he meant. And what I ended up finding out later was I had got it mostly right. But really what it boils down to is each day you wake up, and as a Christian, I would posit this as universal. But when it comes to Second Amendment advocacy, you need to wake up and ask yourself whom you seek to serve. And you must answer that question and then go do that. So for us at the Iowa Firearms Coalition, we seek to serve the membership first, the state of Iowa as a whole second, and on down the line you go. And sometimes when you're working with these people that you happen to like, some of them you don't like, and some are, I know it can often be a cruel statement to say this, but the ends justify the means. That does happen sometimes.
Yeah.
We tend to depart a little bit from who we're working for. Because you want results. And at the end of the day, sometimes you say, this result doesn't benefit the membership. It's very temporary. It's not even one slice of 8 of the pie. And I think we'd be better off coming back and doing this better next year than accepting this or this flawed thing this year. And sometimes you have to say no. Yeah. And then you got to go back to those same people you sought to serve and say, I couldn't accomplish this. I'm sorry. I wanted to, but it was wrong. And sometimes they like that. Sometimes they don't. And so I've made some mistakes and said, dude, get them something. Let's get this and let's go. And ultimately it set the whole thing back, and it took much longer to change something that was codified, and it was a mistake on my part or our part. And I don't wish to duplicate those mistakes. So you got to ask yourself whom you seek to serve, and then continually do that. And it's hard.
It is hard. And it's tough to, that balance is very, very tough. I just had a discussion, I think it was yesterday, the day before, where, I mean, we've accomplished so much in San Diego, and we've accomplished a lot in California, but San Diego in particular, we've come so far. And it didn't just happen, you know. We made it happen. And I had a discussion from somebody who was they're not happy with CCWs. They think it should all be open carry. It should be constitutional carry, and it should be open carry. And you know, I don't disagree with that person, except for that, you know, CCWs are a waste of time. I disagree. You know, we've come a long way. Is it the perfect scenario? No, but sometimes, you know, if you can't get, you know, great, at least get good, but never support bad. And, you know, it's tough, and it's tough to kind of find that exact spot. Like, okay, are we compromising our principles, or are we getting closer to, you know, a final goal? I know sitting around and just hoping for perfect for a couple of decades isn't going to work. You know, yeah. But you guys like incrementally got there. You had nothing, and you had a little bit. Now you got the whole, you know, the whole thing. And I think that unfortunately sometimes that's the way you got to do it. You know, the anti-gunners didn't damage us this much overnight, and so we can't undo what they have done to us overnight. It's going to take a lot of time. It's going to take some time to change things politically. It's going to take some time to change things culturally, but right. It's really difficult.
I've heard a lot of people say that Rome wasn't built today, and they're right about that, and I understand what they mean. Now, a smart follow-up question would be, well, how quickly was Rome built? And see if anybody can actually tell you that, because it does make a difference. But you're right. There are cultural responsibilities here and cultural considerations, because the truth of the matter is, if you want to move from nobody getting issued a permit to constitutional carry on an open basis, you're going to have people that are shocked. You're going to walk into a gas station and people are going to freak. I mean, there's going to be some of that in some places. There are other places in California, as you know. This won't be a stretch. Those are rural communities, and it's not going to be that big a deal at all. But they're going to be urban areas where people flip out. So it's going to take some time for some of these things to wash through. And I think that there is some level of responsibility that we can have when it comes to warming up to some of these ideas. Now, another part of me says, well, this is a fundamental, inalienable right. There's only so much consideration I'm going to give for that before I tell you, well, I'm sorry if you don't like it, but I have a whole bunch of kites in my truck. You're welcome to fly them all.
That's awesome. I might steal that from you.
Go ahead.
Well, that's awesome, man. Congratulations on everything that you've done. Anything coming up? Anything in particular that you want to talk about, or any kind of concerns you have coming up in 2025?
Yes. First of all, I should correct you. There is no me or Michael. It's a group of volunteers. We don't have paid directors, anything like that. I would like to have enough membership and income to support that. That'd be great. And I think that we're eventually going to get there. It's tough to do that. But this group of volunteers and the people that preceded them, the folks on our board and our executive committee, they're exceedingly talented. They're very dedicated, and this does not work without them. I mean, I worked the gun show circuit when I was a pup for years, standing on Friday and Saturday and Sunday out there on the concrete trying to bring people in, and it's tough work, man, and it's thankless. So it's a tremendous group of people and a lot of members and others that have led to where we are now, and I'm so thankful for them. I truly am.
That's awesome.
As far as how things are shaping up with the legislative session, we've got some big ticket items that we really want to take care of. We would like to get the Iowa permit to carry as a green light, if you will, as an exemption to walk in any school. Because the reality is now there's a somewhat obscure section of Iowa Code, 724.4b, I think it's .2, something like that. Anyway, that says anybody can carry with express permission from the school. And then almost no schools do that because they're afraid that their insurance will trip them up. Because there's a lot of schools in Iowa who would write those permission slips to people like me and others and say, we would prefer that some of you guys were around when you come to watch your daughter play volleyball or in the school, because we want that. But they don't want to tangle with the insurance company. So we'd like to have the state of Iowa change that. That'll be a heavy lift for these guys, and it may take us a while to get there, but we need to do that. And the other one that we're keying in on is that's what I would call a big ticket item, is today in Iowa, a lot of employers ban any kind of weapon in the parking lots of their workplaces. So you can't have a carry gun, you can't throw in your shotgun to catch the last few hours of daylight in public or private hunting, but you can't do any of those things. And they fire you because Iowa's an employment at will state. They give you the boot for any or no reason. And so it's a de facto ban on firearm use the way that it's applied. And we want to make sure on public and private parking lots that they recognize their ability to make those dictates stop at your door handle.
Nice.
And we've had a few people in the business community, not very many, but a few people in the business community that are very powerful that said, we're not doing it. And so basically Iowa legislators are going to have to decide if they believe in our state motto, which is our liberties we prize, our rights we will maintain, or they're aligned with the business lobby. So I look for it to get kind of bloody, because we're going to have to pull some people out that have been very good supporters for us in the past, that are aligned with the business lobby, and they're not going to like what we have to say, and they're just going to have to suffer it or vote appropriately, one or the other.
Well, that's awesome. Michael Ware from Iowa Firearms Coalition. Your website is iowafc.org, right?
iowafc.org. You betcha.
iowafc.org. You can also see some articles on AmmoLand. You've written some really interesting things on AmmoLand. So check him out, and thank you and all your advocates and all your volunteers and your board and everybody that's working so hard in Iowa. I got to tell you, I feel your pain, and I'm so happy and proud of all the hard work you guys have done. And thank you so much for taking a few minutes to come and talk to us here in San Diego.
Oh, I was glad to be on. Thank you very much. Now, is it okay to ask one more question, or are you
Sure
for time?
Sure. No, what do you got?
I want to know, okay, so let me give you some insight, and I don't think that I'm out of line to say this, and I will admit that this may sound disappointing to you, but I find a lot of people around here basically say, why do I care about California? The state's gone anyway. And that hurts me. It hurts my heart to have them basically write off brothers and sisters that need the help, that want the help, that benefit from the help. And my neighbors and friends say, well, what differences would it possibly make? So knowing that does get said, and it does get thought, how can we help California? I want to know what we can do to help you.
Boy, that's a great question.
That's a big question.
Yeah, right. And I got to tell you, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you even bringing that up. I'll say it like this. You know, when I moved to California when I was 18, it was 1994, and I moved to San Diego 3 years later. And at the time, you know, everybody was moving to Oregon and Washington, and then Oregon and Washington got real weird, and everybody started moving to Arizona and Nevada. And then everybody started to move to Texas. And then everybody started to move to Tennessee. And everybody started to move, and everybody started to move, and everybody started to move. And it was because of not just the gun laws that got crazy, but that was a big part of it. There were a lot of people that would leave the state, leave California, and then throw rocks at us on their way out. You know what I mean? Like make fun of us for staying. And if you look at the rest of the country in the 90s and you look at the rest of the country today, things are starting to turn around thanks to advocacy and thanks to lawsuits that have passed. But all these crazy, ridiculous, horrible gun laws started here in California, and then we exported them. And a lot of your neighbors embraced them and said, "Yeah, all right, we'll do that," or maybe you didn't even care. That's even worse, you know. And so the way to help us in California, there's a lot of ways, but number one, recognize that we have some of the most passionate, hardworking advocates here in California. You know, we have people that have decided to stay here and tough it out because we're passionate about making the change and putting up the fight. So the idea, you know, when you see somebody in another state living under the blanket of freedom that they didn't even fight for, you know, they just moved into it, you know, they haven't, you know, raised a finger, and they are making fun of Californians, you know, or criticizing people in California. You know, remember that there are hardworking people who are staying behind enemy lines because we're passionate about the Second Amendment, passionate about other things too, but particularly the Second Amendment. And I think that those folks, just a simple thank you would be real nice. You know, above and beyond that, I think that, you know, coming out to visit, I think in the most extreme case, if someone said, "Hey, you know what? I'm going to take a job out in California and I'm going to fight for the Second Amendment while I'm out there. I'm going to return home, you know, after a few years, but coming out and taking a tour in California to fight for the Second Amendment would be awesome." But then, you know, as you're looking at the folks that you contribute to, you know, NRA, Gun Owners of America, Firearms Policy Coalition, FPC, all these groups have done such a fantastic job. Second Amendment Foundation, SAF, you know, throw a couple of bucks to San Diego County gun owners, you know, Orange County gun owners, Inland Empire gun owners, and listen to Gun Owners Radio, and you know, tell your friends about us. And I think that if the attitude is changed towards Californians, you know, so that it's a positive, that we're seen as the warriors that we are, who are staying in the fight, not running, not fleeing, and you know, helping, coming out and fighting with us, and then you know, throwing a couple of shekels our way, I think that'll go a long way. You know, that'll go a long way.
Do you anticipate seeing a fundamental opportunity with the Olympics coming there in 28 and the shooting sports that are surrounding that? Because that might be opportunity. I'm curious to see how some of those things go. I mean, are there things that you can talk about there, or should I not have asked?
No, I haven't even really thought of that, to be honest with you. I think that's something that we should explore and think about. I hadn't even thought about that. I haven't even tuned into that. So I think I'm gonna put that out to the listeners, and you know, email me and message me, and let's figure out what can we do. Is there a way for us to leverage that? I think it's a great possibility.
Well, I've talked with some of the Olympic shooters and recorded them at IFC's Warrior Wednesday. We try and tape something and put it out on Wednesday around supper time. And some of them were talking about how hard it's been to keep the shooting sports in the Olympics, and that they were set to drop them a few different times. And now that it appears anyway, that they're in to stay for the time being, then that means all this stuff's going to happen in and around LA in 2028, and there has to be infrastructure for that. There have to be places to go. They're not going to have them shoot out in the desert and travel 4 hours to where the Olympians stay. So you know that it's going to be going on around there. I would wonder if that isn't tremendous opportunity to say, okay, maybe we may need to change some city ordinances here, some county ordinances there, some state things here. It could be a catalyst for some better things for you. And if you could, dude, capitalize on it. Do it.
I think that's something to explore. I think that's potentially a fantastic idea. Hadn't even occurred to me. I'm not, to be honest with you, I'm not a big Olympics guy, so I hadn't even really thought it through that way. But I know we just met. The new head of the NRA was out in Orange County, and he brought along, his name's Doug Hamlin, and he brought along Kim Rohde, who's she's a California resident, and so I think
I interviewed her the other day.
Yeah.
What a lady! I mean, you have to be dedicated to shoot 1,000 rounds a day for years. I mean, that's unbelievable. That's. I did the math on that real quick when we were on videoing, and I want to say it's roughly $100,000 worth of ammunition a year.
Jeez,
it's a ton. I mean, it's a bunch.
That's a little bit
and
more.
I was impressed with her. Really nice lady, but I mean, 6-time Olympian. That's a big deal.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Didn't have plans to go to California for the Olympics, but I might.
Well, that'd be great.
Opportunity. I mean, why wouldn't you? I mean, I'd like to go see some of that stuff myself. So
we should coordinate that. If you're serious about coming out, we should figure out how to make how to coordinate that. How to maybe we could help and participate some way. Let's see what we can do.
Fantastic. You know what? This is good. So if you ever make it back to Iowa or you want to do something like that, or you come through the neighborhood, reach out to me. We've got a warm bed. You're welcome to it, and we'll accommodate you any way you can. I mean, admittedly, I own a custom shop, and my range is right here because I have my shops out in the country. So there might be a few neat pieces in the collection here and there that you'd be interested in, but you are welcome here. Well, we want to see you.
Awesome.
But I asked the question about helping because I meant it. So I appreciate that answer. Thank you very much.
You bet. Well, thank you for coming on. Michael Ware from Iowa Firearms Coalition. Thank you so much, man. Thank you for everything you do, and tell everybody I said thank you for what they do.
I'll do that. Thank you for your program, and thank you for all the people that you're reaching. It's a serious thing. I appreciate your work.
You bet. Thank you.
Mike. Thank you.
Alicia, how was that for a show? That was cool, right?
Two fantastic guests. Absolutely.
Yeah, right?
Absolutely.
That was a good show.
I loved it.
Let me, before everybody tunes out here, this show was sponsored by Cargo. Cargo Rugged Gear Outfitters in El Cajon. Cargostores.com, 423 Broadway, El Cajon. Go check them out. They're selling burners. They're selling cases. They're selling all kinds of cool stuff. Please support them. GOR gets you 10% off their website, or if you just mention it at the store to get you 10% off. What's up, Alicia?
I want to give just another credit. Once again, another great Mike. What's the trend of Mike's? We had a super chat donation from Mike White. So
hey, Mike White. Yeah. Thank you, my friend. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you all for listening. Also, another sponsor, John Dillon. This guy works so hard. He does such a good job. He's an attorney. John's been helping more and more people fight GVROs, gun violence restraining orders. These protective orders are out of hand, and he's been helping. Those are gun violence restraining orders. If you know somebody that's had their self-defense rights taken away without due process, call John Dillon. His website's dillonlawgp.com. His phone number is 760-642-7150. And then our other sponsor I wanted to talk about. Let's do this real quick. We got a couple minutes, Rich? All right. So Seal One. Check this out, Alicia. Seal One. I know, right?
I didn't get that one. I bought my Seal One kit.
This is the Universal Pistol Cleaning Rod Kit. So universal means it's from outer space. So if you want one that's from outer space, then there you go. I think that what it means is it's multi-caliber. Basically, any pistol you got, this thing will help you clean. Comes in this really cool case, and it comes with, you got the solvent/cleaner, you got the ramrod here, and then you have the patches. We don't need no stinking patches.
No patches.
We got the patches here, and it's pretty much any caliber, from my understanding. Here, check it out.
Check it out.
Yeah, pretty much any caliber, any pistol caliber, any normal pistol caliber. Somebody's gonna, somebody's gonna buy it, and they're gonna have some weird pistol caliber, and they're gonna be like, "Oh, it didn't work on mine." Well, it's because some weird 1800s pistol, and they're gonna get mad at us. So most pistol calibers, 9mm, 45, et cetera, et cetera. It's going to work. And, of course, Seal One, making your gun cleaning experience smell much better. So check out Seal One. They're a fantastic sponsor. We really love those guys. So go to seal1.com. Are they still doing the Rich? Can you still enter to win the
Mag 40?
Yeah. So you could, what is it, Alicia?
The Mag 40, which means the part 1 and part 2 of the class with Masad Ayub.
With Masad Ayub. You could win tickets by, all you got to do is make a Seal One purchase, right?
Yeah. That's it.
$25 or more, no purchase necessary.
$25 or more, no purchase necessary. But if you make a purchase of $25 or more, you're entered to win the what is it again, Alicia?
Mag 40.
Yeah, Masad Ayub. He's coming to town in March. So thank you all so much. Alicia, any parting words?
Just keep up the good fight. And I, I think I love that Mike, this other Mike from Iowa.
Mike Ware.
Yes, gave us some good things to think on. Good food for thought for, good homework now.
Yep. I think it's a great idea. Yep. The Olympic thing was not something I had even thought of. I'm not again, I don't really, I've never gotten into the Olympics. Are you into the Olympics?
I like parts of it. It depends.
Yeah?
Yeah.
And then when they spun it off and did summer and winter and alternate years, when it was all in one, but I don't know. I just never really got into it. I feel like the most un-American guy that way, but I don't know. I've just not quite gotten into it. So, all right, everybody, different show. Have a happy new year. Thank you so much for all the success of San Diego County gun owners and Orange County gun owners and Inland Empire gun owners. And, of course, Gun Owners Radio. Please have a very safe and happy New Year's Eve. And we're looking forward to a very successful 2025. So I hope you spend the next week with loved ones or family. If you don't have any loved ones, spend it with family then, But anyway, have fun, and we'll see you here next Sunday. Share our content, and thank you so much for joining us.